Before you judge, before you get angry with someone, with their position, really try to understand. Ask those questions. Get to understand why they're thinking what they did, where they're coming from. I feel like that is just, the world's moving so quickly. It's just so easy to make snap judgments. Someone posts something, someone says something. Just take a moment, step back, and really dig in. And I feel like we're missing a lot of that. So make sure that you're spending the time to understand where someone's coming from, and don't hold grudges.
Welcome to this week's As Unexpected podcast, when we talk to C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists about how they lead into the future when the future generally goes as unexpected. I'm Scott Marshall, your host, and my own professional experience has made me a believer that it's not how you show up when all goes as planned, but it is how you show up when things go as unplanned. Given all of their experiences, each of our guests has become very attuned to the fact that the future is not to be predicted. My hope is that this podcast can help all of you become better leaders by building the core leadership capabilities for leading in an uncertain world. Hey, everybody. Another episode of the As Unexpected podcast. I'm your host, Scott Marshall. I know I always say it. I'm super excited for the guest. I have to say it again. It's so cool to have Nat here today. And when you got to check out his LinkedIn and see the work he's done. Just phenomenal, combining truly hard skill sets with a vision for really improving people's lives. Love what he's done. We're going to learn more about it in the next 25 minutes. Nat, welcome to the podcast. If we can start off, can you introduce yourself, your background, your current role? It's going to be super fun.
Thanks, Scott. So honored to be here and to be speaking with you, and huge fan of the podcast and Semester at Sea. It was absolutely transformational in my life, and happy to share the stories and the ups and downs. And it's absolutely been a journey. So, and definitely unexpected. So thank you again for all that.
Yeah, of course. So can you give people a sense of your background? Where did you sort of start out, and how did you end up sort of with IDT and the payment structures, and then now you've got another startup, I think, Terraton.
Yep.
Love to hear that background.
Sure. Climate tech, blockchain, and then before that it was agriculture microfinance to rural smallholder farmers in Kenya. And I can tie it all back to Semester at Sea. I was a chemistry major going into that program at Colorado College. Wanted to go abroad, didn't know where I wanted to go, and signed up for Semester at Sea. It just had just a phenomenal experience, absolutely life-changing. I came back from that experience, eyes open to the world, so much more confidence. And I think the big takeaways that I had too is like, if you're going to change the world and do something different, doing something in business or commerce or in theology and religion, those are the two areas that I can focus on afterwards. So ended up going with business and got an economics degree from Colorado College, and jumped into work with a foundation, so kind of the nonprofit social side, but noticed that business wasn't really part of it, of the story. And so then went on to business school and still wanted to do work abroad and got a job with Accenture in Washington, D.C., and then got a great opportunity to work with the World Bank in Kenya for 7 years. Ended up staying there for 7 years, which was nuts. And actually, funny story with Semester at Sea was during 2001. So I was on the ship during September 11th, which was nuts. And so our itinerary was changing all the time. Constantly keep moving. But it's really just launched my career in entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. I love that confluence of business and using business tools and commerce to achieve social goals and solve poverty and alleviate poverty. That was a big part of my focus. And the company in Kenya that I helped start was a rural microfinance model where we gave loans for cows and irrigation equipment to help farmers generate income. And we could go into very remote rural parts of the world and provide loans and help people send their kids to school and feed their families and improve their homes. And gave loans to over 100,000 farmers in that period of 7 years. And it was, yeah, phenomenal. I would have never done that had I not had the semester at sea experience before that.
Wow, that's amazing. And can you share with them your current company, Terraton?
Yeah, so I made the shift from rural smallholder farmer microfinance into fintech and payments and blockchain. I thought with this background, there's got to be something I can do to help the refugee crisis, and created a digital wallet for refugees and migrants to move across borders with their phones, because they have money, but they're carrying cash, and launched that across 10 countries in Africa, and ran it through COVID. It was a very difficult time to fundraise for a company during COVID, but we survived. And then luckily got acquired by a US company that does remittances out of Newark, New Jersey, called IDT. And they send hundreds of millions of dollars a month to Africa, and we've connected our system. So it was a fun journey. And then, of course, couldn't stop there. Just a couple of months ago, with some friends who worked at Google, launched a new company that is helping to get anyone into the carbon credits market, and particularly focused on agribusinesses in Africa and Latin America. So bringing in both the agriculture, smallholder farmer experience I have and the payment side, working with refugees, to now have a business that helps people create revenue and create businesses through carbon by removing carbon out of the atmosphere and then selling these credits to companies like Microsoft and Google.
Wow.
So,
love it.
It's a lot. It's a mouthful.
Yeah, but I love how things just kept coalescing and coalescing, and now you've got this piece that brings so much of all of what you've done in the past together. That's super cool. That's awesome. I'm guessing through all of that work, through that career, there's been a few unplanned turns and pivots and changes. Our audience is here for a couple stories. And what's most impactful is when they hear how you showed up for yourself when something went completely as unexpected, and for others around you, and what lessons we learned through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's every other month is something that's not expected. As an entrepreneur, you're always having to deal with changes. And I know COVID affected the entire world. And I just think the timing was, either hindsight, it worked out really well, but at the time for Leaf, we had just launched this company. We had just gotten the initial round of financing together, like our seed round, and we're literally signing the documents when COVID hit, and investors all pulled out. And I can't blame them. They said, "Why are we going to invest in a company that does cross-border services when all the borders in the world are closed, and we don't know how long it's going to be?" So,
Right.
So the whole round collapsed, but just like kept going, kept pushing. We had to get up the next day and try again, and we had applied for some U.S. government grants with the National Science Foundation, an SBIR grant, and then another grant out of Colorado through the Department of State with the Colorado, and got both of those like a week or two later. So we didn't have time to focus on all the downside of putting these investors together that all fell apart. And so that was enough to let us fund for the next 6 or so months. And then we could go back out. Things started to open up again with the borders, and then we could go out and fundraise. And that's when we got connected to IDT, who acquired us. So it's just like we could have given up. I was really in bad shape because it was one of my past investors in the other company. Jehudi it was in the round, and they're like, "Oh, we just can't do this." And it's rough.
Yeah. So there's a lot in there. There's a sense of just deep persistence in you, right? You and others that you've worked with, you see the destination, but the path there has radically shifted. Yep. It sounds like. Can you go into that a bit more? What is it that really allows you to persist through those jolts or trees fall over the pathway and suddenly you have to cut a whole new path to the destination? What is it?
Right. It's easy to just give up and go do the easy thing. And I think for me, for all three of these companies, it's this mission and this passion for the work or the problem that we're solving. If it's rural smallholder farmer poverty, if it's financial inclusion for refugees, or if it's climate change, that is so much bigger than anything that we could do. And there's always a way around that tree. There's always another path. Like you'd be surprised how many walls really aren't walls. And One of the if you're an entrepreneur out there, you always if you're feeling bad about where you are, you should read Hard Things about from Ben Horowitz. They went through some terrible stuff. Like, it is really hard out there, and those that persevere and survive and make it through the just terrible times as an entrepreneur usually do okay at the end. But it'll test everything that you've got. So that's why that mission is really important. That's bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I love. There's always a way around the tree. Always a way. Yeah, indeed. And what are you really trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a destination; it's an outcome that you're seeking, right? And
Absolutely.
And that's awesome. So now, Terraton. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly. Relatively new. The announcement came out, as you said, only a few months ago. So tell our listeners a bit more about how you sort of put the pieces together and where you're at in terms of really launching this into the market.
Yeah, sure. And the name comes from Terraton, as in bigger than a gigaton, and that's how tons of carbon are measured. Is that we want to do more than just a gigaton. We actually want to do a teraton, but it's spelled Terra as in Earth. So
right.
Great little name there.
Love it.
So then the idea came out of is actually when with Leaf, with the wallet in Africa, in Latin America, one of the challenges we had as a business model is that a lot of our customers didn't always have a job or regular income and couldn't put money onto the wallet, and then we couldn't make money. And so I kept trying to find more and more ways to create jobs or create income for our customers. And my dream was, could you just get someone to download an app in the middle of nowhere, a rural smallholder farmer or a refugee in Uganda or in farmer in Colombia, and do an activity from that phone that then helps generate income. And then we had the infrastructure to do the payment directly to that person or that farmer or that refugee. And so they could create an income just through their smartphone. We're not quite there yet, but that was the thought with now carbon credits. As you know, that whole market is set up to help big corporations and governments get to their net zero pledges by purchasing a ton of carbon to either offset their activity or, in our case, to try to remove a ton of carbon from the atmosphere. So they're actually in a better position. And the trick with all this is measuring and validating and having an activity that the science backs it, that it actually can work. And that's why I'm so excited to team up with my two co-founders, who were both formerly at Google, but one of them, Kevin Gibbs, if you type in something in Google and it suggests what you're thinking, that was his side project at Google, which is now rolled out to the whole world. So he's a great guy, and he's brilliant. And he worked with me in Kenya at Jehudi. He was on a sabbatical. That's how we got connected. And then the other co-founder, Greg, is an owner of Dandelion Chocolate in California, in San Francisco. And so he has all these great connections to cocoa processors all over the world.
Of course.
So we've got this great network of ag producers that we can work with to help validate these activities and remove carbon. And our first activity that we're working with is the creation of something called biochar, where you heat a bio waste. So if it's cocoa pods or if it's coffee husks, you heat without oxygen in a kiln. And that sequesters carbon. It pulls carbon out of the atmosphere. It keeps and stores the carbon in that organic material. And that can be sold as a carbon credit to the market for $150 to $200 a ton. And that is now what we're working with agro-processors and farmers in Africa and Latin America to set up these businesses. And then we're doing all the validation, verification, the technology to help create the business model so that all the customer has to do is just find their waste that they're burning anyway or they're getting rid of, and follow the methodology to get paid. And then we help secure the payments, send the dollars back to Africa and Latin America. So a cool way of generating income for these rural communities and rural farmers and their families, but also removing carbon out of the atmosphere. It's a win-win for everybody if it works.
Indeed, it does. So I'm trying to figure out where to go with this because there's a lot of places. First of all, what I understand about carbon credits is verification is really important. And that seems to be a key place you're making sure you have lined up as you scale. And it's the biochar that has a clear verification, science-based target to it, outcome, and so forth. So how do you scale this? Do you go through the cacao farmers, or do you go? Is it like you go in a vertical, or do you go more horizontal, finding the biochar wherever it exists?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's where we're really trying to design this to be big and to be scalable and to really leverage technology, the software platform that we're building, and also off the shelf equipment, stuff that's already there, that's already tested to reduce that risk, and then as a starting point, going through those cocoa farmers and working with the big purchasers of cocoa, if it's all the way up to Hershey's or Nestle, those big ones, or the aggregators that are in between, who are all under pressure to get to net zero anyway within their value chains or the supply chains, and then connect through to those farmers. But what we're discovering is that there's a lot of interest and demand from anybody in around the world who has access to this bio waste to generate income. It's usually a cost, or it's a nuisance having all this extra waste there, and that's ideally where we want to get to. Is we're really leveraging word of mouth and local communities and those within the agriculture value chain. So starting with cocoa, and we've got some good contacts within the coffee industry as well.
And it sounds like you're leveraging where the pressure point is, which is these companies making public commitments.
Yep. Exactly. to get to net zero, right? It's hard to get, and we can't solve all of that for them. They also have to decarbonize their operations, but for that last 10, 20%, sometimes carbon removals is the best way to do it. And why not send it through to farmers in Africa and Latin America to do it for them? It's a great story for everybody involved.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program for college students and adults on career breaks, sabbaticals, or retired, interested in learning and exploring the world together. Learn more about the Lifelong Learner program at www.semesteratSea.org. Absolutely. Going back before Terraton and before actually Leaf and Boss, and I'd love to hear when you discovered, and maybe it was expected, maybe this was, you hear about the entrepreneurs who, well, when I was 5, I was making money. And there's those who I talk to are like, I had no plans to be an entrepreneur. It just sort of happened. And I think it's helpful for people to understand that it's not just something people, well, I knew it. How about your entrepreneurial journey? Clearly you have it, but was it something because at 5 you were, selling newspapers or whatever it is?
It's a good one too. And no, I mean, maybe if I look back at my life, I'll find some examples of that. But I really feel like I was following a traditional path, going to school, going to college, getting from business school, working for a management consulting firm. Like, was miserable, but I was just doing it because that's what everybody does. That's the path to go. You pay off your loans, and I think it was actually at that point when I was consulting in DC and just not particularly happy with the work, with the clients' work, and these huge organizations that I was trying to help move the needle just a little bit, and still have the backdrop of my Semester at Sea experience. I helped start a program at Vanderbilt called Project Pyramid, which was leveraging students from the business school, the law school, and the divinity school and engineering school to solve social problems around the world. And it's actually still going today. They still class is going. I wrote a book about my experience in Kenya, and they read the book every year. It's just kind of fun. So more about just telling people like what to avoid and what not to do. So yeah, if you're looking for a funny story about just like what to avoid as an entrepreneur, you should read my book, because I made all the mistakes going into it. And maybe that's because I got in late as an entrepreneur. You make a lot of mistakes really quickly, and you got to learn from those and learn quickly and not be afraid. And again, I think these are tools that I learned from Semester at Sea. Is just going into a new world, a new environment, learning quickly, figuring out how to get money, where to go, the public transportation. And then each time you do it, you get a little bit more confident that it's new, I don't know it, but I can learn really quickly. And so I think that was it. Just I was desperate for something international as management consulting in DC, and found this project with the World Bank, and got connected to some great mentors, I think, too. One of the directors of the bank in Kenya, this individual, Leke Dondo, who really helped get a lot of the programs started in Kenya, I think was a wonderful entrepreneur and a great role model. And he showed me how you can, with a lot of patience and a lot of hard work and persistence, you can really create literally anything and learn and become an expert in anything. So I feel like I got all that from my experience in Kenya.
Yeah, and I am reading into what you're saying that you have, and maybe you've always had, maybe you developed it, this real integration of humility and confidence, that they coexist. We can't learn without humility, and we can't move forward without confidence. And somehow you've embraced them both. Maybe can you explore that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I love about the material you shared before, is that that humility is so important. I think you do learn that when you're a guest in a country and you're visiting a new culture, a new society. It takes a lot of patience and understanding, and learning the language, learning the culture. That goes so far. And I think I really applied that well in Kenya. I spent a lot of time learning Swahili, whereas a lot of my expat friends who've been living there for 5 or 6 years never learned any Swahili. And I'm so glad I did, because I could go into these rural communities and these farmers and talk to these old ladies or old men who are farming and speak their language in a way that they could understand. They loved it. It just suddenly broke down those barriers. But spending the time to really understand who you're working with, who your customer is, really understanding their problems. I would go out and live on the farm with some of our farmers to see how their days were. I'd help milk the cow in the morning, and get the eggs from the chickens, and play with their kids, just so I understand what their day-to-day life is. So then we can design the products and services to better work with them. And then same with refugees. I didn't know anything about refugees and had never worked with them before, but spent a lot of time in the U.S. and in Rwanda, interviewing people, talking to people, understanding their journey. And it's a very diverse group. You can't just say, "Oh, this is the refugees, this is what they do." No, it's incredibly different. And I think that humility is so important. And then to have the confidence to jump in and do something, because otherwise you have this knowledge or this dream or this idea, but to take that first step is also really, really hard.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So this is a great moment to transition quickly. So Kuki and Cam, two of my favorite young Semester C alum, are kind enough to offer questions from a younger generation and look at the world perhaps a bit differently and offer some questions. So let's watch that video, and if you don't mind, I'd love to hear your response to it.
Where do you look for sources of leadership today outside of the workplace? Is it social media, LinkedIn, Reddit, family, friends? Curious to know.
Good question. I definitely say less and less LinkedIn these days. I feel like we get a lot of thoughts there and far fewer leaders, but a lesson in leadership I feel like I encounter day to day would certainly be those from my mom. I'm quite a big mama's boy, but I think these days I'm increasingly uncovering early lessons she instilled in me on leadership that I was given as a kid. I think as I just experience life and new situations, they begin to unveil themselves. And then I take a lot of inspirations from my friends. I think, leadership exists on a big and a small scale. And so seeing friends, just in our day to day develop new passions and interests really adds to my personal life philosophy. So I'm curious where other people find inspiration for leadership today.
Okay, so we got to hear from Kuki and Cam. Nat, what do you think about what they're putting forward?
Yeah, and where to look for inspiration and leadership, and it's hard too. It's the stuff I feel like that's out there on the news, on social media. At least with me, those always resonate. It's kind of what gets attention. And so, I've been lucky that I've had some wonderful mentors growing up. I had the dean of Colorado College who really pushed me and got me to take my first job out of school. And I mean, you've been a dean. I feel like some of those experiences, people who've seen students, who've seen people in your position go through life, have great perspectives on like what works and what doesn't. And they've been, great people to help me. And then I also mentioned the director of the bank in Kenya was a wonderful mentor. Was an entrepreneur, was a senior business person who had all these great sayings and ways of just looking at challenges in the world. And one of his big things was don't hold grudges. I would get so mad at these investors who said they'd come in and invest and then they wouldn't. And then like I'd see him later and he's like, no, just let it go. Don't hold those grudges. Like it's okay. And things.
What a great lesson for life.
Exactly.
For life,
right? It's so easy to hold on to that and just let it go.
Yeah, there's so much in that. I appreciate their question too, because I do listen to podcasts. I generally avoid the news. Mm-hmm. I read a lot of books. I talk to those who have been through life longer than me. And one of the great lessons in life is what you just said. This discourse that we see in the social media realm is really holding grudges. It's pain, it's anger, it's frustration. And once we sort of reflect on our life and take some accountability for what we can do in life, then holding grudges is such a ineffective way to live life. Maybe that's too stale of a way to say it, because you actually said it much better than me.
Just counterproductive, right? There's so many other things we can focus our energy on instead of just having these grudges and being angry at someone, because maybe it's also a lack of understanding, I think, too. And that's, I guess, what was really fun to see is some of the investors that I hated and I wrote bad things about in my book, and I changed some of their names. But like they would go on to start companies and then get beat up as an entrepreneur, and then they'd come back and say, wow, I'm really sorry. I was a jerk. I didn't know how hard this is. I've had that happen now with two. In fact, one about a month ago came back to me and was like, I'm sorry for being such a jerk. I didn't know. And it was like, wow, he's just holding on to that for 15 years, and finally to let that go after starting a company. It was really great closure, I think, for both of us. So don't hold on to those grudges.
Don't hold on to those grudges, for sure. And it's one thing that is a challenge for all of us. This idea of, compassion maybe has too broad or ambiguous sense to it. But if we just talk about, starting with the other and trying to understand where they sit, and it's not easy, right? It's work. But boy, if we can start there, it changes how we approach every day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And you clearly have really embraced that because your social enterprises, the way you show up, clearly that idea of really starting with the other has been a powerful part of your life. With that, I would love if you would be willing to close by offering particularly our young adults, but anybody really, a singular piece of advice that they could take with them from this podcast.
Yeah, no, I think I feel like that's a big one. Really, before you judge, before you get angry with someone, with their position, really try to understand. Ask those questions. Get to understand why they're thinking what they did, where they're coming from. I feel like that is just, the world's moving so quickly. It's just so easy to make snap judgments. Someone posts something, someone says something. Just take a moment, step back, and really dig in. And I feel like we're missing a lot of that. So make sure that you're spending the time to understand where someone's coming from, and don't hold grudges.
I love it. Be curious, be compassionate. I love it. That's a lovely place to end. Nat, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time with me today.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me share the story. It's been exciting. So,
and
thanks.
Hopefully we'll meet up in Colorado somewhere together.
Please do.
All right. This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program where students visit 10 countries on 3 continents, all while taking 3 to 4 college classes through Colorado State University. See course offerings and upcoming voyage itineraries at www.semesteratsea.org. Thank you for joining this week's episode of the As Unexpected podcast. The viewpoints and opinions of featured guests do not necessarily represent those of the Institute for Shipboard Education or Semester at Sea. Hit the like button, share it with your colleagues, family, and friends, and remember, be curious, be compassionate, be courageous. That's what it takes to lead as unexpected.